part is they have nice overhangs at least. I think more and more houses should have long overhangs. Yes, yes.
One minute.
Should we add that to the budget? Clock with a second.
All right. Well, the time is 6 o'clock, and I'm calling to order a called meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. And Council, we do have most of our agenda items going to be on the public hearing for the budget. If you're here to speak to the budget, please wait until that item. I think we'll get through the other items fairly quickly, and we'll let speakers address the council for anything specific to the budget at that time. But if you can't wait, then we'll be doing public comments next. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up for agenda item number 2, which is public comments. So if you wish to speak at this time, then please go ahead and step up to the podium and state your name and address the council.
This place is wild. Good afternoon or early evening, Mayor and Council and citizens. I just called on this today because I share stuff on social media, and this is one of the reasons why I think we need to do away with the yard rebate and come back with AC. We had a good program with the air conditioning. It used to be, I used to Autotech back in the day. I did conversions from R12 to R134. You didn't have to replace the condenser and all the other evaporators and all the other parts. It used to be, and I'll read this, this is the statement. There are huge changes happening in the HVAC industry, that's AC, heating and AC, over the next couple months. So this is a heads up. If you're a homeowner or soon to be one, you might want to take a moment to read this. They have made a big change to the refrigerant in the AC systems. The reason it's a big deal this time, unlike last time, is the suddenness of the change. Last refrigerant change was started in 2003, but was not mass produced by manufacturers until 2007. This allowed plenty of time for the industry to experiment and learn the new refrigerant. This was a guinea pig era for R410A. All that's going bye-bye. The new R32 and R454A is a sudden change with no crossover time to learn the new product. The proper way when changing refrigerant has always been to replace the entire indoor and out system to match. So if you have R134 and another refrigerant, no go. However, in the event a customer was not in a financial position to replace everything at once, there was a way to mix match, like I did in the automobile field, and at least get them through until everything could be replaced. The new refrigerant will not allow this. So that means you're going to have to pay for a whole new system. And over in the Villas, they had the old Casas. I believe you were with Service Wizard? Me too. Top of the line. If parts are 30 or 60 or 90 days out, the ability to swap a condenser will not be possible. The only option now is full system replacement. When a change like this occurs, manufacturers must hold parts until warranties expire, and the complete change typically takes 20 years. If I were in a position for needing a replacement in the near future, I would rush to make the change before the changeover is mandatory. The manufacturer started releasing the new equipment and lines and updates. Prices are going way up. I mean, this is new stuff, and it's, hey, That's the only thing they're going to sell to you. Hopefully this will let you know what's coming very soon. No HVAC contractor asks for this. Our goal is never to make things harder than they have to be, and I hope I didn't go over my 4 minutes. I'm running for president under the Kennedy ticket, so vote for Morris. But yeah, that's just a heads up. I don't see any reason to have that grass rebate, especially your turf grasses like Jorge's Palisades and the Palisades and Zenith zoysia that we have over in the corner on Sunflower. Those are your drought resistance. They can go up to 15 weeks without water. The St. Augustines and all the other grasses in the area, it'll be dead. It's a water hog. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anybody else wishes to speak at this time, please go ahead and take your turn at the microphone. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 3, which is consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. We have 2 items that we can approve on consent. Councilmember Rosengard?
I move to approve on agenda item number, let me go back to see them. Agenda item number 4 and 5.
Okay, does anybody want to pull one of those items? Is there a second for the motion to approve on consent items number 4 and 5?
Second.
All those in favor of approving on consent items 4 and 5, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we approved on consent. The minutes from the August 20th, 2024 regular meeting and the ordinance canceling the November 5th, 2024 general election and declaring the 3 unopposed candidates to be elected. And I believe that saves the city $400. So that's thank you for that. So council, we're going to go into our final agenda item. We're going to start our public hearing and presentation of the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. Right now, the budget is scheduled for adoption on September 3rd, but we do have additional dates if necessary, but we'll be missing some council members depending on when those additional dates might go forward. With this, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing at 6:06 p.m. And we'll start with an introduction for the updates to council from the last presentation. And then we have a couple of speakers that wish to address council with some additional requests to consider. So we'll start with the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So in the backup that was provided with this packet, staff made changes based on feedback and discussion from the previous meeting and the first presentation of the fiscal year 25 budget. So in total, only with all of the changes, only $75,533 of new operating expenses were added to, potentially added to the budget to be considered. So of those, so in the new budget, in the new draft of the budget, so the communications and events, that's potentially the new name of the position, retooled position, was funded at full-time. The admin assistant, that's the new position, funded at full-time, and the trail patrol and community resource officer, funded at full-time. As the backup explained, that position was actually already funded at full-time. We just needed to add benefits. And then the intern line item was greatly reduced. So in total, only $987. There was only a net change of $987 to personnel expenses, but that funds all 3 of those positions that were discussed last time at full-time. Contractual services, so the janitorial services, which is actually an employee of the city now, a non-regular part-time. So one note to staff is we'll need to change, like that should be coded to salaries, not to contractual services. So that's just something we can fix internally because it's not a contract. The service, it's an employee of the city. And then we added 9,000 to, this is a contractual expense as well, we added 9,000 to the radios operation and maintenance line item for increased license fees and maintenance fees for in-car radios. That's in the crime control fund. And then, let's see, you can see here the other operating expenses. So we we funded 31,000 from the American Rescue Act. That's the remaining amount from those funds received for COVID relief. And we're going to fund that to a trail sign rebranding project that's already underway. And P&E recommended that, and that is an eligible beautification and wayfinding were eligible expenses from the American Rescue Act. So 5,000 was added for marketing and promotional expenses out of the HOT fund, and that is to fund the Sponsor a Highway program along Highway 290 frontage. So that is, we basically pay the fee, the service, they clean up that section of the highway, and we get our branding. So they'll be contacting us so we will have our logo, and it'll say, sponsored by City of Sunset Valley. So just additional way to market the city and to beautify the highway. So, and then finally, 17,500 was added in rental expenses. This is a once every 6-year expense for leasing of the Brazos ticket writer machines. So that is a crime, that expense is in the crime control fund as well. And then just one other change, you were provided with I can scroll to it, a new balance summary, budget summary at a glance. The committed and non-committed changed here, and that is because we took about 540,000 of the committed funds. That was the remainder of the Parks and Open Spaces and Beautification Fund that was created several years ago, and we went ahead and funded projects, FY25 projects with that, both the Savannah Trail and the City Hall backyard. So those were the changes that were made. We will have an updated budget summary at a glance at the next meeting, depending on how discussions this evening go. But in checking in with finance staff, we will have new balances that will include August sales tax revenue and July interest. So, and then whatever expenses are. I think we'll probably run that report on Thursday, so the 29th. Do we want to go ahead and move to public hearing, or do we want to discuss any of those items? Sure. Sure. So representatives from the Sustainable Food Center are here, so I'm going to welcome them, Amy and Maya.
Good evening. Do I have to turn this on? Hi, everybody. I'm Amy. I am the Farm Viability Director at Sustainable Food Center. We oversee the SFC Farmers Market at Sunset Valley and have done so since 2010. I wanted to come here to answer any questions that y'all might have, because I know our budget looked a little bit different that we proposed this coming year for our Hot Funds application. And to show you maybe a few mock-ups of some signage that we've created. But if you'll see, thank you, Matt, for projecting that budget there. Yeah, our line items year on year are the same in almost every category except for signage. And the reason for that is that it's time to reinvest in our physical materials that we use for signage every week due to SFC going through a rebranding process and City of Sunset Valley going through a rebranding process in the past few years that have not translated into our printed materials. And what we'd like to do is propose a partnership wherein we can update all of these things at once. It's a one-time investment. This wouldn't be recurring. We could use these things for multiple years. Where we can kind of co-brand the market a little bit better and make it look more cohesive. So these are really rough drafts that we would put these to. We're working with a graphic design company right now to go through our rebrand. But to just make it more clear, the support on the bottom of every sign that we have, that this market is sponsored by Sunset Valley, and to make our just signage more cohesive between our two brands. I think that our colorways kind of overlap really well. We've got yellow in ours and green in ours, and you have yellow in yours and green in yours. But just to help us think through where we could potentially place these signs in more permanent locations as well around the city, both on potentially the lamp posts where you already have signage, on the fencing along the frontage road. We're in talks with AISD to have some additional signage just stationed on the front and back entrances of the Tony Burger Center so that people during the week, and not just on the weekends when we have staff on site to put up signs, know that they should come back on Saturday and come to the market, hang out in Sunset Valley, get something to eat, and do some shopping.
Can you go back to the budgets?
So our advertising line item stays the same year on year from last year to now at 5,000. Promotional items, musicians are the same. Activity providers, I think, actually went down a bit. Sample tent supplies stayed the same. Our social media associate just went up with sort of cost of living increases, but that's been a really successful campaign for us to have somebody on site to do organic content creation week over week. We've had a lot of interest and increased followers on our social media, which we have seen actually translating into an increase in foot traffic at the market. And a new line item in this year is indirect. And then on Matt's suggestion, we pulled out porta potty support into a separate line item for general operating funds, which I understand has already been taken care of.
And so, council, what's in the current mayor's budget and the latest version that we've had for this meeting is in hot funds request is $24,500. Is that correct? And so this would be what we believe you're asking is in order to cover the signage plus the social media associate, some of those other costs, is $7,978 in additional hot funds. And so, council, this is a consideration for us when we're adopting the budget. What I'd recommend is that we include this in our bring back items as an item for council to consider whether we adopt or not, but also right now you can take the opportunity to talk to SFC if you have any questions about the request, but we'll be bringing it back as one of those bring back items for council to consider, and along with some of the other requests, because I think if council desires that, but I think it'd be good for us to weigh that as their request, since we've been a good partner with them for many years. So any questions for either the city administrator or SFC? Councilmember Medigas?
Well, I just was, I think the signage would be great. I just, with our sign ordinance and all that, where we could put them, and that might be some logistics to work out.
Sure. Yeah, I would be really happy to work closely with you to make sure that we're staying within the rules and regulations of the city.
Burrow?
Just to be clear, thanks for the presentation. Just to be clear, the $13,250 that's noted as general fund total, that's non-city funds? Or is that the city's general fund?
That's the city's general fund. So that was a proposal by Councilmember Johnson, I believe, 2 fiscal years ago. And so basically what the city does is covers half of the cost. So SFC and the city split the cost of having toilets at the market, and so they are TDS. So they were taking them off every weekend, but that was, so now they have locks.
It was more expensive to have them take them off site and return them every week, and so now we get them serviced every week and they're on site with a lock.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good partnership because now the market is using TDS, who is the city's waste provider, and I think they've really, I think they've been a better vendor for SFC. So
they've been much easier to work with than our previous vendors.
Good. And that $13,250 is already in the budget. It's already built in.
Councilmember Medigas?
So there's basically two buckets that the funds come out of. So the general fund, the porta potties, and then, so the increase is out of the hot fund of close to 8,000. But no increase to general.
Well, the general fund did increase by $32.50, and it's just because. Yeah, go. Just have to go to the mic.
We had a problem with the shed that is already there at our market. So that shed has been, oh, I'm sorry. That shed has been present for so long. We don't know who placed it there, and it was it was being a hazard for a lot of our employees, and whoever is working and taking things out, they were hurting themselves. So we decided to replace it with another shed, and we added that. We got a quote, and I gave it to Danielle, and we added this to the general funds. She
So
said
that's
this is
that's
gonna
the
be-
3250.
Yes.
The shed,
That's,
yes.
that's the extra.
So that's actually, that's another than one-time cost.
I'm not sure if she added it already or it was, but I know that she told me to add it to the general fund.
Yes.
And
I-
that would be,
I remember, yes. So
Yes.
that 3250 is the one-time cost for the shed, because that shed is very, Carolyn's not here, but I don't know how long that shed has been out there.
A long time.
But it's a long time. But it's the shed that, it's basically the shed that, it remains on site. It's where they store everything that they use week to week, so.
So are you getting a bigger shed?
it's not necessarily a bigger shed. It's just a shed that is not damaged, that a new one that we can use because we store our tents and tables and chairs there, so we don't have to take them to the office every week, and it's more convenient for us. So basically, it's just a new shed that's not.
Could use a bigger shed.
I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. We didn't want to go like beyond more than this, but yes, if we can have. I mean, we're aiming at a better market because it's been doing so well lately. And we have a lot of big ambition for this market. And if we can get a bigger shed, yes, why not? We're not going to say no to this. Yes, of course.
So that may be another bring back as well. If the council member feels strongly about it.
And it gets really crowded.
Any other questions from council? So we'll be voting on the budget next week. If we're proceeding as according to our schedule, it could be delayed beyond that. What we'll be doing is listing these as potential items for council to include in the budget they adopt. And so I'll work with Councilmember Medicus on if we want to try to also add funding for the right size shed. That might be something that we talk a little bit more about. So we may split these two into two separate things. Councilmember Johnson?
I actually do have a question. So
Okay.
with I remember when the plan was to take away the porta potties, and it was a little, I don't know, but do those ever get like broken into?
Yes,
Okay.
that's an issue that we're having, and I was telling Amy I need to address this with the chief
Yeah.
officer. So we're not having any problems, and we could tell that, they were getting broken into, and then for last year there was no incidents until recently. It's been very bad. They broke through the whole lock, like we cannot even. Not the lock, like the whole door. Like we cannot, even if we get a new lock, the whole door, they're getting bolts and they're just breaking.
Okay.
And TDS only responsibility is to clean the balls, and that's it.
Yeah.
So we go there, they're living basically there, so they just like, it's terrible. So let's say TDS cleans it on Friday, we come Saturday and we find it all very filthy, and our team members are having to clean them, and it's not very nice.
Okay, so, and my concern there are like runs for any new shed and I know the shed has been broken into, like you guys have had
Yes.
tents and
Yes.
canopies stolen out of there.
Yes.
So whatever you get, you might want to get some advice. I mean, there's
Yes.
where there's a will, there's a way with those things, so
I know.
I don't know if it just starts becoming more of a regular
Patrolling.
patrol.
Yes. Basically, they're living there. We see toothbrushes and juice bottles and, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, you've already said it, but like have lots of conversations about that.
Yes.
I have noticed when I visit, it was always pretty vibrant. There's a lot of people now. It's like as long as the weather is good and we've had a great summer, then it's really happening. So I think you guys are doing a good job over there.
Thank you. It's gonna get better.
And They shared with me, so you've added additional farm and rancher vendors, which always, right,
Yes.
brings more. And I believe they have data that shows there's more, there's more visitors, but there's more Sunset Valley residents that are attending the market,
Yeah,
right? I think
we'll,
that's
we'll
what you're-
have some data to share in our
Okay.
final report,
Great.
but we can share the amount of non-Sunset Valley residents who are coming to the market. And we've had an increase, probably 50% in our farmer and rancher vendor attendance. So there's just a lot more grocery produce items to shop for at the market. It's been really taking off. I credit Maya entirely. So we're just really excited about the trajectory of the Sunset Valley market. It's we've had weekends this past year where sales at Sunset Valley have exceeded our sales downtown. And that's just, I think, a testament to your ongoing support and just sort of the trust that people have in the community of Sunset Valley and our market being there for so long and being so consistent.
Yes. And our aim is to have a real farmers market. So, you know, everyone's asking, where are the farmers at a farmers market in Austin? And Sunset Valley is having this number. So in spring, we had around 9 farmers, besides not ranchers, just farmers with produce. And that's a huge number compared to, you know, the Austin farmers market. So you go to any other farmers market, it's just a market. It's not a farmers market. You barely see maybe 1 farmer or 2 farmers. But now we can very proudly say that Sunset Valley is just, and farmers are telling each other. So come to Sunset Valley, and every time we have more farmers, we're getting more customers. So because this is what the customers are looking for, fresh produce, you know, and the quality of the customers that come are customers who are looking to get their fresh produce and local produce at the market and to meet their vendors, to talk to them. It's just like a very specific kind of customers that we are getting that don't go to other markets. Plus we have the parking for free, so it's very convenient. It's a beautiful market because it's kind of like there's grass. It looks like a farmer's market. And with this high amount of farmers that we're getting, and we're aiming at recruiting even more, I mean, we're heading towards a beautiful market. And this year, maybe this year will be nominated the best farmers market, I'm hoping, in Austin. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we had another speaker that was going to make a public comment.
Okay, green light's on. My name is Burton Pearson, 39 Pillow Road. And I wrote this up, a little letter to you all, and posted it on the Engagement HQ site. What I'm here to do is to request an increase in the prairie restoration budget. This last year we were at $40,000. They put us at $40,000 for next year. This past year was primarily a planning stage, and so we didn't do any of the real labor-intensive work on restoration this past year. I think there were about $20,000 of that $40,000 left over. I'm not sure about that, but I think there's something like that. So I'm asking for that $20,000 essentially to be rolled over. Normally I know you don't roll over into the venture, but I'm asking for $20,000 to roll over so that the budget for next year will be increased to $60,000. This is primarily because next year is where the real restoration work is going to begin. The projects I'm addressing primarily that I know are scheduled, I think on 3 sites, the Manley property, 37 Lone Oak, and Indian Grass Prairie, will be establishing test plots, what are called test plots. These plots help us understand what plants, what type of restoration will really work on these sites. There needs to be multiple test plots per site because you have different soil types all across these sites. And the larger the test plot can be, the more information you get. The quicker you get information, the quicker you can get. It saves money because you get on the correct trajectory for a restoration that really will be sustainable, rather than just, you know, a tiny patch here, a tiny patch there, put those plants in, oh, that didn't work, do it again. The bigger the patch, the more species you have, the quicker you find out those target species that are really going to actually work. Also, another very labor-intensive thing that's coming up this next year is the removal of invasive plants. This is a huge task. The sooner we get rid of the invasive plants, the less invasive plants we've got to get rid of. I'll give you an example. Over on 37 Lone Oak now, we're having an invasion of mesquite trees over there. And yeah, it's going to be labor intensive to get those all stripped off that site. So we'll save money in the long run with this increase, and really this increase is funds that have gone back or will roll back into the venue money for P&E anyway. So that's what I'd like to request, and that's why. I think there's one more thing, but yeah, I think that's reasonable and doable. So yeah, we thank you very much for your consideration of this, and I think it will save some money in the long run. And I'm very excited about this project. I think we're going to be able to do some very spectacular work here, and really help to grow to a small extent, and maybe even a large extent, the actual greening of the economy and the diversification of the economy here as we get more ecotourism, certainly birders. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if we could, for that particular item, it'd be useful to know how much money was spent out of the current year budget, like to date, just so the council can consider that as a request, as part of the request too.
So we've spent 25,000 of the 40,000 year to date.
So there's about 15,000 that was left unspent so far. That there's about 15,000 that
Correct.
will not be
Correct.
spent before the end of the budget.
There possibly may be some additional expenses, but you know, I don't think we'll come close to spending that 15K in the remainder of the year.
Okay. Council, questions for the city staff? Councilmember Johnson?
Sure. My first question is about the urban forestry. It's broken out across two different funds. I'm not sure why that is. It's like 9 in one, 5 in the other.
I will have to look that up. My guess is it's in, Kyle, can you look that up? General fund and venue. So.
And I remember it was supposed to be 9, and it's 9 in the general, and then for some reason.
Oh, because we increased it that one year, correct? And then it's just stayed.
Yeah, and that's cool. And the thing is, I remember talking to Carolyn, and she said that it would be very hard to spend that much money on just planting trees. I mean, we get them at like almost wholesale prices. So, let's see what this is here. I thought it was 9. Now I'm having a hard time.
So we've spent 7,500.
Right, and
out of the.
And I'm kind of curious to see where that is. The last one had a lot of T-shirts and a lot of food, so I can only assume that's. I think we kind of went overboard with that side of it. But
some of it's spent on if we prune trees throughout the year, we use some of that to help with the cost for that.
okay, I was actually to prairie restoration. I was saying if we're going to look for the money somewhere, if it's hard to spend 9, then, and we were just talking about. I'm Mr. Forest, but we don't live in a foresty place here, so maybe the money's better spent over
Carolyn is streaming and his teams meet. So urban forestry, one is so obviously the one in the venue fund is for water quality and erosion, and then additional funds are spent on like tree health care, and that, as Dakota mentioned, trimming and making sure. I maybe she'll chime in, but I think there's another line item like for Arbor Day. I think the expenses around Arbor Day, I think that comes out of another line item, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But
I haven't been through. I go past the 37 Lone Oak. We got to get a different name for that. It's no longer. But and I think those trees are doing mostly pretty good. That's like one of the larger plantings that we've done. Dakota, how are the trees doing in the Manley tract that we did this last?
They seem to be doing pretty good.
Okay.
The trees some of the smaller things the grass has overgrown them, so you can't really see them.
Yeah.
But
I'm like plant, and then I mean if they're just all dying, then I might have to rethink this. But if we're spending the money, I was gonna try and divert some. Sorry, Vern. But if we're actually spending that budget, then I guess that's good. Okay, that's it for now.
Councilor Manicus?
I just had a question on the balance for the hot fund regarding the SFC increase. Where are we?
So,
With all the
let me
COVID.
bring that up. So the balance is now, hang on. So it's at a 30, so with the additional 5,000 for the sponsor of highway, it's at a $5,000 deficit. So adding, that would make it a 13,000. If we added the 8,000, that would make it a $13,000 deficit. And it has a balance, I believe, of around 700,000.
Can you bring up the budget summary as a glance that's
Sure.
in the updated
Sure.
council packet? Because that, I think, is what we're looking at, right? The expected ending balance of the fund. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll have to, we always get the last quarter of hotel tax after the last of the year, but I don't know if we're going to be above or below, what we budgeted for. I think we budgeted 230,000. I don't know if we're going to be above or below that. It just depends on the last quarter. But so, we were expecting to end with a balance of 674,000. So that would, if we added the additional 8,000, that would put the hot fund at 666,000.
That's all the reserve, well,
That's the fund balance.
the
Yeah.
fund balance.
Mhm.
But the income this year that we projected and what we.
The
are-
income in FY25.
Yeah, what are we projecting for 25?
We're only the only income we don't have interest revenue anymore, so the only revenue is hot tax, which is 230,000. And right now our expenses are at 253,500.
So that will come out of the,
That would come out of the fund
Fund
balance.
balance.
And we're already bringing in, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the revenue's at 250,000 because we're already bringing in 20,000 from fund balance and sending that to the CIP, and that's for the art at City Hall backyard. So.
Can you bring up the budget summary as a glance just to look at the
Mhm.
venue funds expected in the year?
Yes.
It's the 1,532,000 looks like.
Correct. So that would be, if we added 10,000 to that, it would be 1,522,000.
Other questions about this request or any of the other requests, the SSC ones? Anybody else wish to speak? At this time, we'll also revisit public comments after council discussion, but if anybody else wishes to speak before we start into our discussion about the budget, now's a good time to do it. All right. So council, what we're considering tonight are, in addition to public input, which I'll also note that we did have a couple residents, in addition to the request that that was just stated for the additional venue funds for prairie restoration. There are two other comments that I saw in the engagement. One was from the Arts Commission chair, who posted, in favor of the budget, but also I think just in general support for some of the specifics with ArtFest and the art funding that we have. And then there was another comment that was posted today with the idea of proposing that instead of putting a annual amount of money into the utility infrastructure, was trying to adjust for those infrastructure replacements by exploring the idea of a bond, right, once every 30 years, I think is what proposed. But if you read the comments, that might also be something that council may want to follow up on. And I will say that we are following up with our legal group in terms of if that's even possible for the city, given that bonds are typically, held
They're
against some.
typically, secured by property tax.
Right.
Which we don't have, or, it's like revenue, which, our utility fund doesn't bring in a lot of revenue, so.
Yeah. So council, what I'm doing is I'm keeping a list of additional bringback items. When we're meeting and to talk about the budget next week and potentially adopting the budget, we'll have a list of all the bringback items with an associated cost with them so that if council is choosing to move forward with some of those items, then we can specifically call them out like we did in previous years. And then the final budget will be adopted with those changes. So we may have like a version of this that we bring back next week with some additional iterations that council can see what that exactly would look like. But for these three, at least, they're pretty straightforward. We don't need to adjust salary line items, and these are just straightforward requests. But we do want to make sure that the other ones are broken out so the council can consider those separately. The other thing that we'll be talking about next week, in addition to adopting the budget, there's a whole host of things that we also pass once we adopt the budget. So those items will be listed on there. We'll also be bringing back any potential changes or proposed changes to the staff descriptions, the job descriptions, including any potential, if we're moving forward with, for example, the community event coordinator, there's going to be a job description revision to that. There'll be a job description for the admin assistant, and then we had some minor updates for some of the other job descriptions, primarily around pay ranges. So those will be also something that council would adopt along with or the same session as the budget. Potentially, we could also wait and adopt those in a later session, but it's nice to do it at the same time. So council, with that, I'll open it up for council discussion about the budget and questions for the city staff or questions that anyone has for myself. We'll start with Councilmember Johnson and then take other council members with Councilmember. Are you deferring to Councilmember?
I think she's.
Okay, Councilmember Rosengart, why don't you go first?
I'm definitely for going back to 18-month reserve. And so I'd like to know if we need, how much money we would need if we were to do it within this budget cycle.
So if we were calculating it based on, I believe we talked about this, so it would be another, so if you see here the budget summary at a glance, you can see we did calculate the reserve that you see, that is the 12-month reserve based on the latest data. So that would make the reserve, an 18-month reserve, it would need to be 8.93 million. So that would, make the non-committed funds at 609,000 instead of the 3.59 million.
609,000 left.
Correct.
And
Based
then-
on this, so we will, again, this is always changing, right? Because the bank balances are always changing. Fund balances, excuse me, are always changing. But we will have an updated budget summary at a glance sheet that will include the latest round of payroll and AP expenses. But we'll also have August sales tax revenue and July interest. So.
Then I would also be in favor of another 500,000 to put away in the utility infrastructure line item. Leaving 109,000 non-committed. So you basically leave it in the general fund, but you commit it to the utility infrastructure.
I'm sorry, so you leave it in the general fund, but you
No,
want
I'm asking you, when you commit it for future infrastructure, do you have to move it into utility funds? You have to transfer it?
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
do you leave
you could commit funds in the general fund
Yeah.
for utility fund, but it just may, if you're committing it for the utility fund, you might as well transfer
it.
it to
Okay.
the utility fund and put it in that infrastructure.
So we can certainly bring back both those as items to consider next week too. So one would be increasing the reserve to the 18-month as part of the budget adoption, which would essentially draw down from the non-committed and put it into the reserve amount, as well as council considering that additional 500K for a total of $1 million to infrastructure transfer for the utility fund. Councilmember Johnson, did you want to talk next?
Yes, the street fund ending balance looks like 4.3 million. That's pretty good, right?
Correct. That's, you know, and that's if we spend
$1 million
all that we,
and-
you know, intend to do with capital projects. Of course, we have one out for bid, which is the repairs on ERW, which are, you know, quite costly. We are considering some change orders, but then there's the, just the estimate of what the Brody Mill and overlay will cost. We don't know what those, you know, bids,
Okay,
we'll have to see what those bids.
there's like 2 mini projects, and I asked Dakota for just like a quick estimate on one. Like an additional, well, 2 crosswalks, and there's unfortunately some, what would you consider that? Well, it's like ADA accessible, so there is gonna be some concrete work that has to be done. On Jones,
You're talking about the Sunset Trail.
right, so
Intersection.
Sunset Trail North, so the one that the Montessori school's on, we're moving towards the direction of adding stop signs there and adding crosswalks, because it's quite a dangerous intersection. And then we're gonna look at maybe redoing the striping towards Sunset Trail South, which goes into Sunset Valley. Does that even cost enough to consider in the budget, or no? We could just do that with,
I mean, it's gonna be a couple $1,000s. It's not gonna be anything crazy. It could be
That-
probably done out of street operations.
The R&M street budget probably will have that.
so do we need to throw it in there? We don't have a plan yet. I mean, the crosswalk's a little bit further along, but it was just like when it was restriped, it doesn't flow.
I don't
So we're
think
gonna look at it.
the striping we can cover in the normal, you know, operating budget with the street fund, but
Yeah, we can use the street fund
yeah,
for that.
because that has a good amount in it.
And the crosswalk seems like it could be, I think you mentioned like that could just be like third party, right?
Yeah, we'd probably wanna
Yes.
hire a contractor so it can get it done as fast as
And
possible.
from a management perspective, that's not too much to take on?
Nope.
Okay, so. And do you want a number for that?
I think we can bring that back as a bring back item for staff to put a potential number there.
Cool.
One question I had is, this was discussed at public safety to some extent?
We were out there last week and looked at how that intersection, well, I was brought out there to look at it. Chief Carter and Officer Brownlow had already brainstormed on ways to make the entire pickup, and it's just an afternoon thing. Morning runs a little bit smoother, a lot smoother. And so the focus was on that intersection to add the crosswalks, stop signs, just to allow traffic to flow a little bit better. It's multi-steps. We're working with Sunset Valley Elementary and the Montessori to have slightly better pickup plans. So it's multi-stages. The only thing that requires any money though is the crosswalks. So they looked into it. I was out there Friday and yesterday. We brought it up in public safety. There seems to be broad consensus, like people were into it from public safety.
And staff, is that something that we could potentially have like a short summary of, not just the cost, but what's being proposed? Is that something we can get by the next council
Sure.
meeting?
Yeah, we'll work with Public Works and PD to come up with a summary of
Yeah,
what that would
if-
look like, that make sure it, you know, meets all the standards and, yeah, the most effective layout of what that would be.
Okay, so we can list that as a bring back item, but also include a little bit more detail in terms
Yeah.
of like what it would look like and potential, you know, staff require, you know, recommendations, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Medicus?
So, to that project, I've gotten a couple complaints about coming out of Sunset Trail. Is that gonna address those issues, with the striping and people stopping in front of the school? And if you go in the left lane, it's a turn lane only, and would that address all of that?
It came up at public safety, and we don't have an immediate plan for that. We do know that after it came up at public safety, we had a few people that mentioned that it's worse since the new striping there, that actually things were better at that end without the striping. So we will look at that. I'll work with Public Works, but our answer last night was, yeah, that we would try to get a comprehensive to fix Jones, at least those traffic issues from that intersection that we're talking about, the crosswalks, all the way to Westgate.
Great, thank you.
I want to also mention one more thing. So the problem was, I think the main problem is turning left. And if traffic is kind of backed up, you're poking yourself out there. And people that want to turn left onto Westgate, there is a bit of a turning lane, but some people, if they're backed up and they see that it's clear, they'll just go into oncoming traffic, and unfortunately that goes across. And we saw it on, was that Friday? That white pickup truck that got into, I mean, they must have gone 150 yards in the oncoming traffic just to, at school pickup time. So it's restriping, but there might have to be some of those like white plastic ballers or something set up just to say, he doesn't like them.
No.
No, you don't like them. or something just to say like, you can't go this far to, so I think we have to stew on that one a little bit more.
Yeah,
I remember-
go ahead. We had 3 visitors to public safety last night, and we rarely get visitors, but that was one of the issues that came up.
You referring to, are you referring to the portion of Sunset Trail that we own? Like as far as the turning lane?
It was when they were coming out of Sunset Trail to turn left onto Jones, and then also people are blocking that street. So, you know, if people are like lined up there to turn left onto Westgate, then you can't come out of Sunset Trail. And then the other complaint was about the cars just stopping on Jones Road for the school and just sitting there. And then there's nowhere for people to go except the turn lane that is like a turn only onto Pillow, which is great, I love it. But I mean, you know, it's like, it doesn't help people move past the school traffic, or the school traffic has to keep moving or something.
We may just need to do like a traffic study and then just have like a traffic engineer tell us what they think is best for that. Because if we keep just guessing at it, we're just going to spend more money if it doesn't work, just restriping and keep continuously doing it.
Councilor Rosengarten?
Okay, I was just reading one of the comments in engagement, and they were saying to tie up capital is not a good idea. So if we moved and tied up 500,000 for additional utility infrastructure, including the first 500,000 in the mayor's budget, will we accrue interest on it or will we not?
We will.
So the only way we would accrue interest on it is if we kept it in the general fund.
No, so all of the city's funds, except what is needed to operate, right, that what we transfer to our city's checking accounts, right, which we only have a checking account for the general and the utility, but so most expenses are paid out of the general fund.
But you keep it
But
in
the
a
rest of the
pool.
money is in these fund balances that you see
Yes,
down here. They're all in one tax pool prime account, the
Tax
city's
pool
tax pool
account.
prime, which is the high interest earning account, except for the CIP fund. Excuse me, I'm sorry, the crime control fund, and that is only because that's That's a special revenue fund. It's a separate payment from the comptroller, separated from the other sales tax we receive. So that's the only other tax pool account we kept open. So it doesn't, you know, again, the accounting, the financial software is keeping those fund balances for us. So if it's sitting in non-committed general, it's earning the same amount of interest as if it was in the utility fund reserve.
But is it sitting in the general fund or is it sitting in the tax pool? Can we keep it in the tax pool and commit it? Can you earn interest and keep it in the tax pool, but commit it to infrastructure? Kyle is saying yes.
Either way, it's going to be in the tax pool prime account, whether it's in committed general funds or whether it's in the utility infrastructure reserve. It's in the same bank account, different funds, different fund balances, but in the same account.
And I understand, you're
Yeah.
simply using the computer to
Yeah.
say, hey, we've committed 500,000
Right.
for infrastructure, but it stays in the tax pool, you're not moving it, because earlier when I asked you, you said you have to transfer it into the utility fund if that's what you're gonna commit it for.
Right, it's
No, you keep it in the tax
it's a
pool account.
transfer, but the money's actually,
Only when you need it.
well, it's a transfer, but it's not
Got
not
it.
like our old system where we would have to transfer between the actual tax pool accounts.
You're
The
not
transfer
actually
is
moving the
happening
money,
in
you simply do
the
it
tra-
on paper, or
Yeah.
doing it digitally.
Correct.
Yeah, the transfer is an accounting function, not a actual bank transfer.
Okay, so we would be able to earn interest on that
Yes.
money. Okay, that's what I needed. And we're not doing this annually, as this memo says. It says, well, if you're doing 500,000 annually, that's not the suggestion. The suggestion is a one-time of putting in these funds to play catch-up, because years past, we used to put a certain dollar amount aside for infrastructure.
That's what that extra, so you're saying your bring back request, the additional 500K, you're not proposing that to be an annual, that's just, like you said, to play catch up.
There's no way, because we don't know
Yeah.
what we're gonna get over and
Yeah.
above this year, so there's
Okay.
no way you can do it annually.
Okay.
You can only look at what is non-committed right now and say, okay, take that non-committed and let's commit it to this project. Leave it in the tax pool so it earns interest.
Yeah, so we've earned 1.16 million in interest through June
Thank
of
goodness.
this fiscal
Yeah.
year, so,
I wish-
but that might not last forever. Fed's meeting next month, right? So, yeah, there is, it's on the rise.
Other council members make any questions for council, for staff, or other comments? So since I did receive a question from one council member, I think it would be helpful from just general approach to how we talk about utility rates. Could we bring up the website with the utility rate information? And, you know, when we talk about utility rate changes, I want to make sure we're kind of keeping it in the buckets of things that that we are changing, so that when we're discussing, you know, potential changes that are part of the mayor's budget, and we're explaining to residents, you know, what these are doing. So if you can scroll down to that list of bullets right there. So, you know, council, one of the things that I want to make sure we point out is that the utility rates is not just proposing rate changes, it's proposing some changes to how we service or allocate costs, I guess, across the utility rates. And so I just wanted to kind of summarize from my point of view, and staff, you can feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm making incorrect statements, although without Carolyn here, I feel like I have a lot more free reign to make those statements. But, you know, taking these kind of one by one, the first bullet, creating a meter-based rate structure as recommended by the Texas PUC and TRWA, that in itself is not impacting most residents' rates if we are not adjusting the base rate, right? So if we say we're just changing that to a meter-based, most residents are on the meter base that is our, you know, our current base rate. I can't remember which the 5.8 meter.
5.8.
If we, you know, in the absence of any base rate changes, that is really just more of restructuring, you know, what our base rate charges are for. It does affect a subset of our residential utility service in that they have larger than 5/8, you know, meter sizes. But I just want to make sure that, you know, when we're considering these changes, that's a big structural change, but it's not necessarily it's not directly tied unless we change the base rates, right, for most residents. Go ahead.
And we would, Carolyn did indicate that we would be reaching out, if council does elect to adopt some or most of these changes, and including the meter-based rate structure, Carolyn indicated we would reach out to, it's a handful of residents that have larger meters, and we would reach out to them, letting them know, hey, this is coming down the pipe, and maybe they could look at switching meters, or there's also a device that basically you insert in and
It reduces the flow
reduces
down to
the
a 5/8,
flow
yeah,
down
yeah.
to the 5/8. Yeah, so those would help, assist those residents that do have those larger meters.
The next bullet is creating a 5-tier water volumetric rate system. We currently have a 3-tier system. This is documented here in terms of the proposed volumetric. So it would change essentially the tiers to include a little bit more nuance and have associated rates with those. So that bullet will affect rates because it's essentially charging more based on the volume that you're using. And in general, those volume numbers are higher than what we're currently charging for the 3 tiers that they fall under. The next bullet, again, this one I think was agreed to by Budget and Finance to eliminate the no charge for 3,000 gallons of water usage. Is that correct? Did they discuss that, or was it just part of the recommendation?
They didn't take a vote on that, or it wasn't, but I believe, and early on in the discussions, I did not really feel pushback from the committee, given that,
Okay.
Councilmember, you may have a different feel, but I feel like that was not a sticking point.
The
given-
final discussion on utility rates was to work on solid waste and to leave water and wastewater as they were.
Okay. So that one was not recommended by Budget and Finance, but essentially getting rid of that no charge, which in previous council discussions, the conversation has been that that's not really necessarily an equitable charge for households that have more than X number of people, because it's hard to even achieve that. Given that, though, that would be taking away some of the benefits for people who use low water and maybe on fixed or low incomes. Essentially, that last bullet would be to create that community assistance program in order to, have a way of absorbing that cost. If they were both low income or fixed income and use $3,000 or less, then we'd want to try to make sure that that benefit was not, or that rate increase was potentially not as big as it would be otherwise. So that would have an effect on a smaller, probably, I don't remember how many households we have that use less than 3,000 gallons, but it's not a whole lot, right, in terms of the number of users or service endpoints.
Yeah, I don't think it's incredibly high, but there are a number of households that consistently use.
Right. So that would affect just those households in that third bullet point. The next two are really just base, or I should say the base rate for water, base rate for wastewater, and then the monthly charge for solid waste are really just proposed increases to the base rate. So that'll affect all customers in the residential side, and those increases would be on each monthly bill. And then the volumetric rates, the change there that's being proposed, if you scroll down, it's proposing that the first 10,000 or 999 gallons would have a $1 per 1,000 gallons charge, versus where if you scroll up, there's no charge there currently, I believe. Correct. Yeah, and there's also a small increase in the 10,000 gallons, so matching that $1. So just in terms of the conversation, what council can consider is that some of these changes are affecting rates for residents. Some affect a subset of residents, like the meter size rate-based change affects a subset of our customers, if we're just talking about independent of the base rate changes. The under 3,000 gallons affects a subset of our users if we're just talking about just that change by itself. And so when council is looking at this, all these items are currently in the mayor's budget. If there are questions about specific of these items, that's where staff can hopefully direct people to this website to give folks answers. But it's also something that Budget and Finance did not recommend. They didn't recommend given what Councilmember Rosengart just stated. Anything except for the last bullet, which they recommended increasing to $15 and some cents. So all the other bullets they did not recommend. They recommend just keeping it as is. So. Councilmember Rosengart?
How much total revenue do we anticipate and put into the mayor's budget for these changes? Because if we do not approve this, we also have to look to see, make sure that our expenses don't exceed our revenue projections.
Right, so I think it was about, you said 36,000 in additional revenue. But again, the utility operational transfer was set using these the proposed rate increases. So the utility infrastructure, the utility operational subsidy was different in the Budget and Finance Committee recommendation because the revenue was lower from their recommendations. But yeah, so we take whatever the revenues and expenses are, and then that deficit is what becomes is what makes up the operational.
So
Yes,
the
it is
answer
subsidy.
is 36,000?
36,000.
Okay. So I had another idea or thought, and it was to work basically on one area, solid waste. Because in my mind, when I looked at the numbers previously, and I've said this before in council meetings, is that the solid waste was the highest percentage difference on what our subsidies were. So on that, the city is subsidizing $21.26, or nearly 70% of that. If you split the $21.26 in half and reduce the solid waste subsidy by $10.63 per customer, then add that on to what the cost is right now. So the cost is $9.13. We would take that from $9.13. So we, in essence, go higher than what Budget and Finance recommended to 1976 total for solid waste. Of course, any price increases we would get, we would pass those on also. Then next year, do the same thing. Take the remaining 10.63 and add that, and then we've got solid waste totally non-subsidized.
And I believe that that's in lieu of doing any of the other changes, just
Correct.
focusing just on solid waste.
That's just solid waste.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, Budget and Finance did not want to touch anything other than solid waste. Now, I would go so far as to create a meter-based rate change and do that, where we do rate the base on a meter size now. So do that and then do the solid waste.
The issue with solid waste is that's completely contractual. And so I think some of these changes, again, are to try to cover the operational costs. So, water and wastewater both have operational costs, including personnel, whereas the solid waste doesn't. It's just, the flat contract that we pay. So.
And that's okay. Either one, they increase revenue for the city.
Right.
And it would be about $31,890 for 250 households.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I will go check in with it. I admit that I have not listened to the audio from the Budget and Finance meeting. It's kind of sad, but land is kind of cheap, or at least land where they have dumps is cheap, and I don't see a cliff that we're racing towards with land, really. I think the cliff that we're racing towards is water. And so I just don't, I don't feel unless we get our price of water correct, we're gonna have the big jump one day, and everyone who isn't paying attention is going to wonder why all of a sudden their rates jumped 4x or whatever. And so I think what we're trying to do is just get ahead of this. Maybe something happens with climate and water rates never go up, and then we just get to freeze them after this 10-year experiment and kind of right sizing or getting our budget right. But I don't know. I'm gonna go listen to it. I'm looking at the, you know, I'd be curious if anyone can put together the reasoning for not taking a swing at fixing our water prices. I'm willing to listen to it. And I know it's not as if I want to spend more money on, I don't want to spend more money on anything. But I think it is the financially responsible thing to do. I will go listen, but I don't see how we get to a point where our Budget and Finance Committee is suggesting what seems to me not to be like a fiscally prudent thing to do, and I respect those people so much. So yeah, I'm gonna go listen and try to educate myself on that.
Okay, on the minutes for July 25th was just sent to everybody.
And those have not been approved, so those are draft.
I heard draft, but this is the conversation. Motion to hold the rates for water and wastewater as is until next budget year made by RH. We're not supposed to use names. JF amended that any increase of wholesale water or wastewater be passed through in FY 2025. That passed unanimously. The committee recommends to council, so long as the general fund is growing, no increase to water and wastewater, and the committee does not support the 10-year plan. Motion to increase trash service rate from its current rate to $15 was made by TC, seconded by RH, and it passed unanimously. Okay, that's what I have there.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I certainly respect the point of view of the Finance Committee. After all, I spent a lot of time on the Finance Committee. But to me, this is as much a policy decision as it is a financial decision, where we're trying to get out ahead of, as Rob pointed out, what we know is highly likely is going to become a crisis. In that, one, the city of Austin is eventually going to raise rates. We know that. Two, eventually we're going to have to change, or eventually there will be a change where we have to get our water from LCRA instead of the city of Austin, which the likely circumstance is that we're only going to get hotter and drier. And that means that the cost of water is going to continue to go up. And now we're going to be competing with other small communities for the available water from LCRA. The world could change, but this is the most likely scenario of what's going to happen. So we need to address this. We can't put it off another year. And we're already in a situation where the costs of water and wastewater are going up every year. And we need to stop the bleeding. Whether or not we want to follow through on this whole 10-year plan, to me, that's another conversation, but I think we need to start now and put something in place where we are ready to deal with this. Because it's going to happen. The cost of water is going to go up. We're already at a point where we got up to over $1 million after several years ago saying we don't want to subsidize water for residents for more than $500,000 a year. That's down to some roughly $700,000 because we moved some salary expenses out of there. but it's still increasing in terms of the amount of money that has to be spent operationally to support this. So I'm in favor of following on this plan that we've talked about, and it is in the mayor's budget.
Councilor Maddox.
So I agree, I have great respect for the Finance Committee, but all of our committees are advisory to the council, and sometimes we have to make the hard decisions. And even though we discussed several years ago passing on the increased costs to the residents, it didn't happen. And I think we absolutely need to take the steps. I mean, if you could increase solid waste a big chunk, almost $20. That's, or you can spread it out and we can start getting our feet under us on the water and wastewater. And I think that's really what we need to do. The plan that we talked about is 10 years to get us to the point where we're even getting near to covering our costs. I think that's reasonable. And a 10-year increment over, rather than a big chunk on solid waste, and then all of a sudden something changes with water and we're going to have to pass on a bigger amount. So we need to start getting people used to paying a little bit more. I mean, the increases are not that much. So I'm in favor of us. We haven't done this for years. It's been kicked down the pike a million times, year over year, since I've been involved, and we just need to bite the bullet and get it done.
Good, and open up for public comments.
Mayor, Council, Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese. I'm speaking with a headache, and so I apologize if I'm not as clear as I might want to be. That said, it's my memory. I think what's important for you guys to do is get the structure right. Even if you don't get the money right, I think it's important that you get the structure right. And it was always, when Clay drugged me into this, wastewater, not water. And so I think we get lost in these discussions of water, but water isn't the delta, right? It's wastewater. So somebody help me, because like I said, I'm not as sharp as I would like to be here tonight. But Clay always said, we need to fix the wastewater, because that was where the big hole was. I think it's important to fix the structure. And like I said, I'm not as clear as I might be some days, but my sense of this is, and I agree that fine if people want to do that, but it's not a hard thing to get a council to fix the solid waste. I mean, we should, but it isn't complicated. What you have at this moment is a council with the wherewithal to fix the problem, which is really hard to get, and I say that with a long history of this situation. Right now, you have a council who is capable of fixing the structure and giving vision for a while and giving a functional vision that's defensible. The whole, as I recall, is wastewater. So I don't know how you fix that, and I haven't looked at it, and I'm not in a position to talk about it. But those of you who have numerical brains and that, look at fixing that, because that was what Clay would always say was the problem, because we didn't have that built in. And if we fix that, I think we will have fixed the biggest part of the problem. It is true that when we agreed to fix this, we only agreed to fix the upcharges in money, but I don't think at the time that we were doing the subsidies with as much personnel. I think that the personnel snuck in there later. And we were really just doing the subsidies on that because we weren't breaking up things in the same way. So I don't think we've always been talking apples to apples. But that's my memory. I apologize for not being as coherent, but those people who numerically look at things and fix them and can do that, please do that. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but when I was on finance, we did look at this, at what the costs, how much money we were losing on wastewater, water, and solid waste. And it was about a ratio of about 6 to 4 to 1. 6 being, and let's say roughly like $360,000 on wastewater, 240,000 on water, and about, again, these are very rough figures that I'm doing off the top of my memory, and about 60,000 or so, maybe a little more, on solid waste. And Kyle, if you know the numbers better, feel free to correct me. That's roughly, but that was right. So to Melissa's point, yes, the biggest deficit is in wastewater.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I think we get charged for, is it like 70% of the water you use, they charge you that much for wastewater? They just assume, because you can't really track it. So they just use some calculation, right?
It's based on the winter averaging amount.
Well, right, but they don't know where the water is actually going, so they
Sure.
just assume, oh, use this much water, this much needs to be treated. We are but a small city that doesn't use as much as Austin, but I think it's actually switched for us because I think most of it is irrigation. I think that's what we mostly use our water for. I don't know. Like, I say we're a small city because I don't think the city of Austin is going to change anything about how they charge us for wastewater. But I don't think most of our water in the city of Austin, where the houses are smaller, or closer, there's less yards, most of that is just they're using the water and it's going down into the sewers and stuff. Maybe I have like a too simplistic view of what wastewater is. Really, if that's also paying for like storm drains and stuff for when it rains or whatever. But I don't know. It just, I think we're paying, if we are paying too much for wastewater, it's because we're just using a lot to irrigate and that water's never leaving. Am I just like a simpleton thinking about this, or? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rosengarten?
So basically, when we do winter water averaging, we're not using our sprinkler system. And that's when most of us can get through without having to use more than 3,000 gallons a month. And our rates are very low. Then in the summertime, we've got the sprinklers on and we've got the house use being done at the same time. By doing winter water averaging, it saves the city money if everybody does it, so we don't have to pay as much for wastewater from the city. Because we only have 1 meter, and it does both, the water irrigation and the house use, there's no way to separate it out. If there were separate meters, we would know exactly what is simply going on the dirt and what is going down the sewer and having to be retreated. So it's the water that's being retreated for drinkable that is where the wastewater cost comes from. The stuff that goes in the ground is simply going into the aquifer.
And I understand that, but in Austin, the number of people that live on a half acre, and we have a small plot in Sunset Valley, but the number of people that live on a half acre in Austin might be 4 times that. And so that's a lot of people using water inside the houses, then that, yes, has to go down into the drains to get. She still thinks I'm crazy, but even after we do the averaging, I think we're still paying too much for wastewater because it's not actually getting treated. There's just not that many people, and it's all going to irrigate. I don't know.
I don't know, I just know the numbers.
Councilmember Medicus?
So Kyle, you said what Councilmember Young was talking about.
So the water department has expenses, can budgeted expenses for FY25. This is with the rate changes. 847,000 and revenues of like 638,000. That's without the subsidy. The wastewater has expenses of about 645,000 and revenues of 480,000. And solid waste, 107,000 expenses, revenues of 42,000. Those are all without the subsidies, but that is with the proposed rate changes filed with the mayor's budget. So the ratio is about the same for water and wastewater. From that.
And the one
that
significant-
loss, that revenue, expenses versus revenue.
I think in the past, Councilmember Young was describing the subsidies accurately, and I think it changed this year because we changed how we budgeted
We did.
the wholesale contract.
Yeah.
We had increased the budget for the item in both wastewater and water around COVID because the usage went up, but it went down after COVID, and we never adjusted the budget back down. So we just did that this year, and I think we did it significantly more in wastewater than water, but, so it kind of changed this year.
Correct.
2 years after I asked for that, thanks.
Hey, we got it done.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of the expenses you
Oh,
pulled out.
your mic.
Oh, sorry. I think a lot of the expenses you pulled out that you moved out of there came out of wastewater, if I'm not mistaken.
I can look that up. So you're asking about the expense, like the contractual expenses? Let's see here. So it looks like we reduced it by about 12% in the wastewater from the wholesale, and in the water, pardon me, by 9%. So yeah, so there was a greater reduction in the wastewater, based on, and that was basing it on actuals. So
Okay, but at this point, basically, we are losing the same amount for both water and wastewater. They're roughly equivalent, if I understood what you said before, right?
It's a little bit more in water, but yeah, close.
Okay.
Also, just something to remember too, there's more and speaking of personnel, there's more personnel costs associated with water, because that's the department where the daily testing and the TCQ, that's where a lot of those personnel costs fall, is the water department.
Councilor Medicus.
So if we just did solid waste, we're not really addressing the deficits, the 2 largest deficits, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The 2 largest deficits are, it's like you do the highest first and then the next one and the next one. So again, I think we need to address it, and it is our staff time that maintains that every day, and not a contract. We need to take care of this. We need to fix the structure. I think Melissa was correct. We need to fix the system so that we can get to the point where we're solvent or covering our costs. I mean, we're solvent, yes. We have the luxury of having a city that is, has good income at this point in time. But this is a structure that's been not functioning for years, and we need to fix it.
Other discussion on either utilities or any other aspect of the budget that council would like to ask questions of or direct staff to bring back more information for our next meeting? So like I mentioned, council, what I'll be doing is working with staff to come up with a format for the bring back items so it's clear, what the costs associated with those are, so that when council is considering adoption, they can include, call those out, we can, like we've done before, where we maybe number them or have them listed so that it's clear what's being made as far as motions. If there's anything between now and when the agenda posts, which will be on Thursday or Friday, depending on how much, work we need to do to complete all the rest of the backup items, please let myself or city administrator know so that we can include those as well. And we're hoping that we can take action on the budget next meeting. And if we, for some reason, can't, we need additional time, then the next option I would recommend is going to the 17th, which would be our next regular meeting. We will be missing Councilmember Burrell as part of that discussion, but if we do wait until that long, what I'd ask is that Councilmember Burrell provide some comments in the next meeting as far as his indicating his recommendation or his preference as well, even though he wouldn't be formally voting if we do go to that second meeting. And council, anything else before we move to close our current called meeting? Councilman Medicus, okay.
I think that's my cue.
All right.
Wait, are we in a public
Motion to-
hearing right now?
Oh, I get to close the public hearing. Yeah, sorry,
Oh,
my
sorry.
apologies. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:29. Thank you for the reminder, Councilmember Johnson. And now that we're out of public hearing, we can have further discussion if there's any that council wishes to have, or we can go ahead and close out our meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we are adjourned at 7:30 p.m.